In a quiet countryside surrounded by rolling hills and golden fields, there once lived a humble farmer named Elias. He wasn't rich, he didn't own much land, and his tools were old and worn, but his hands were strong, and his heart was even stronger. Every morning before the sun rose, Elias would step out of his small wooden house, lift his hat, and whisper, "Today, I will try again." That was his daily prayer, short, simple, but powerful. For years, Elias had been trying to grow crops on a piece of land that everyone in the village said was cursed. The soil was dry, filled with rocks, and nothing seemed to grow there. The other farmers laughed at him. "Why waste your time, Elias?" they would say. "That land has no life left in it. Even the weeds have given up." But Elias would smile faintly and reply, "Maybe the land is tired, it just needs someone who won't give up on it." And so, every day, under the scorching sun or pouring rain, he plowed, planted, and watered that barren land. He worked alone, no one came to help him. The villagers called him stubborn, even foolish. But Elias didn't mind, because deep inside, he carried a quiet faith that one day, his patience would bear fruit. One year, after months of hard work, his crops finally began to sprout. For the first time in years, Elias smiled as he saw green shoots rising from the earth. He ran his fingers gently across the leaves and whispered, "You're alive, you're finally growing." But one night, a massive storm hit the valley. The winds tore through the fields like angry spirits, and by morning, every single plant was destroyed. Elias stood in the rain, staring at the broken stalks. His hands trembled. His lips quivered, and for the first time, tears rolled down his cheeks. A young boy from the village who often watched Elias from afar ran to him and said, "Uncle Elias, I'm so sorry. You worked so hard." Elias forced a small smile through his grief. "My boy," he said softly, "sometimes life breaks what we build, not to punish us, but to test if we're willing to rebuild." The boy didn't fully understand those words, but he never forgot them. After the storm, the villagers whispered behind Elias's back, "He's too old to keep doing this. He should sell his land and rest. He's lost everything." But Elias wasn't ready to give up. The next morning, before sunrise, he went back to his field, kneeled down in the mud, and began picking up the broken pieces of his farm. One by one, he cleared the debris, removed the fallen branches, and fixed his fences. When his neighbor, Tomas, saw him, he shouted, "Elias, what are you doing? It's hopeless." Elias looked up and replied calmly, "Tomas, hope doesn't live in the soil. It lives in the heart." And with that, he kept working. Months passed. Once again, Elias planted seeds. This time, the rain came at the right time, and the crops grew stronger than before. The green fields swayed like waves in the wind, and the village started to believe maybe Elias was right after all. But fate wasn't done testing him yet. One hot afternoon, as he was resting under a tree, smoke rose from the far end of his land. A spark from a traveler's campfire had spread to the dry grass, and soon flames engulfed the field. Elias ran toward it, shouting, "No. Please, not again." He tried to fight the fire with a bucket of water, but it was useless. By the time the villagers came to help, it was too late. The fields were gone, ashes and silence remained. Elias sank to his knees. This time, he didn't cry, he simply closed his eyes and whispered, "God, give me strength, because I don't have any left." That night, for the first time in his life, he didn't set his alarm for dawn. 3 days passed. Elias stayed indoors, silent and still. Then one morning, there was a knock on his door. It was the same young boy, now a little older, holding a small clay pot with a plant growing inside. "Uncle Elias," the boy said shyly, "this grew from one of your seeds that I saved after the fire. I thought, maybe you'd want it." Elias stared at the small green plant. His eyes softened. He took the pot gently, set it on his table, and smiled for the first time in days. "Do you see this, boy?" he said. Life always finds a way. Even after the fire, it grows again. The boy nodded. Elias stood up, stretched his aching back, and whispered his old prayer once more. Today, I will try again. The next planting season, Elias worked harder than ever. The villagers, now inspired by his persistence, began to help him. They brought buckets of water, seeds, and tools. Together, they rebuilt the field from the ground up. When the harvest finally came, the land that once looked cursed became the most fertile in the village. The crops were tall, golden, and abundant, enough to feed not just Elias, but the whole community. At the village feast, everyone cheered for him, but Elias only smiled quietly and said, I didn't win against the land. I learned to work with it. Perseverance isn't about fighting life, it's about believing that what's broken can be made whole again. The young boy, now grown into a teenager, stood beside him and said, You never gave up, Uncle Elias. Elias placed a hand on his shoulder and replied, And you must never give up either. The land, the storm, the fire, they were my teachers. They showed me that quitting only guarantees failure, but perseverance keeps the door open for miracles. Years later, when Elias passed away peacefully under the same tree where he once wept, the villagers gathered to honor him. They named the land Hope's Field. The young boy, now a farmer himself, placed his hat over his heart and whispered, Today, I will try again. And from that day on, every farmer in the village began their mornings with those same words. A promise to never quit, no matter how hard life became. True perseverance isn't just about hard work, it's about faith, patience, and the courage to keep standing when everything inside you says, give up. The ones who never quit are the ones who truly grow.